welcome everyone. My name is Carmen Jimenez from One Young World. I first want to welcome you all, both the audience here on site at the ferry and our digital audience for tuning in. Just a quick reminder that we will have a bit of time at the end of the session for some Q&As. For the digital audience, you will be able to, with the code that will be shown on screen, on slido.com, submit all your questions. For the physical audience here, you can raise your hand and we will come to you with the microphone. And with no further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to present the next session, Going the Distance, Lessons Learned from Arctic Explorer Robert Swan, the first man to walk both poles. Please let's give him a big round of applause.
I think the first person is the right way to say it nowadays, to walk to both poles. Now, I'm going to tell you a story just for 35 minutes, so don't panic. And all of us are on a pretty tough journey as we leave here from COP26. It's not the easiest journey anybody's ever made. And I hope that by the end of... It's not my story, by the way, it's our story. That you might feel that you can also go the distance, because that's what this is all about. Hands up people who are in their 20s here. Anybody in their 20s? Right. Well, this is where that began for me, and I'm now 65 and still in the ring, still going strong. So where did this all begin? Well, it began for me being fascinated by this last great wilderness left at the bottom of the world. And I have a few friends here. Mary Nicholson there, she's actually walked to the South Pole with a team that we had. Raj, I think, has been 3 times to the Antarctic and the Arctic. So there's some people who've been with us in this room. Thanks for coming, team. And there's, I think, some Indians about to arrive also from somewhere who've been with us. So this place has fascinated me ever since I was a kid. And, you know, this was the last time I was properly dressed, by the way. And I saw a film about the real explorers. I'm not an explorer, by the way. I'm merely rather a pathetic traveller. And these people inspired me to want to become the first person to walk to both the North Pole and the South Pole. And I didn't do it for any other reason than just to do it. And Antarctica is an enormous place, even by the standards of Europe. This is a big place, and it's the only place in the world that we all own. No one owns Antarctica. And after years and years of effort, 3 of us stood on the edge of the Antarctic, and we were about to undertake a journey that everybody said could not be done. We were the first people to go on foot to the South Pole since the real explorers like Scott and Shackleton and Amundsen. More people had stood on the moon than walked to the pole when we were doing this 30-odd years ago. And no communications, the radios didn't work. No GPS to tell you where you are. Just using the sun, a sextant, and this old watch to get us to one building in the middle of Antarctica, the South Pole Station. No communications, off we go. 80 days of food and fuel. 360 pounds on each sledge, 9 hours a day, 7 days a week, 70 days in a row. It was absolutely awful. And as we go, and I think one of the things that we're losing, and I'm sure young people here would agree with me, that I think it's very hard to trust people anymore. Whether that's governments, businesses, media, it's hard to trust. And on a journey like this, if you don't have trust, you don't come home, you're dead. So we truly had to trust each other as we go to the pole. If you don't, you fall down a crevasse, and that's it, game over, you don't come home. And after 350 miles, we're standing, I live in California, by the way, and we're standing in an area the size of the United States of America. And we're the only people there. Think about that, a bit lonely. And if you fall over and twist an ankle, break a leg, you're left to die. There's no way out. And beneath our feet in this photograph, there is, in meters, 4,500 meters of solid ice. 90% of all the world's ice is in Antarctica. 70% of all the world's fresh water, it's in Antarctica. And if we continue to melt this, we are actually going to be swimming. It's a massive, silent, deadly force on the planet. We're closing in now, and eventually, after 70 days on foot, I lost 69 pounds in body weight. It was bloody hard work, but we got there. I didn't get there, we got there. And that is the South Geographic South Pole Station. And it was a great moment. We had done this. But the first words that, entered all of our minds is what had happened to our faces. You're not looking in the mirror every morning going, oh, well, And our skin had blistered out. My eyes had changed colour through damage in 70 days, but we didn't know why. But when we got home, we were told by NASA, yes, Rob, you just walked under the hole in the ozone layer the month it was discovered. Ultraviolet rays through, bounced off the ice, and, didn't have Oakley glasses in those days. They were pretty ropey, equipment that we had. And, you've got blisters in your eyes, your face has fallen off, and you come back home and you tell people about this. You're sitting there on TV with looking pretty grim, and do you know people's reaction? Wouldn't listen. This is 32, 3, 4 years ago. No one would listen. And there you are saying, if the hole in the ozone covers the whole planet, nothing will grow on the planet. That's what would have happened if the hole had got larger. But no one seemed to listen. But I'll tell you one thing, it was urgent enough, incredibly, that the world leaders did get their shit together. They got together, they signed the Montreal Protocol in 1987 that stopped the use of the CFC gases that were causing this problem. And after 30 years, the hole now is starting very slowly to fix itself. And it'll take another 100 years for it to eventually fix the whole thing. But it's proof that if needs must, people can act. But this was the beginning of my journey thinking, well, what should my small part be in all of this? What should I be doing? And I felt, well, I should try and be positive. Don't laugh. I try not to. But, the dream was to walk to both poles. And I owed a stack load of money from the South Pole and thought, well, I'll go to the North Pole and pay off the debt. It possibly wasn't the right business choice, but anyway, off we go now. 8 of us, 7 nations are now going to walk across a frozen ocean. Remember, none of this has anything whatsoever to do with sustainability or looking after our world. All I had realized is that no one would listen to me when I was standing there with my face fallen off and my eyes with blisters. And I was thinking, what does it take for people to listen? Off we now go, 700 miles across a frozen ocean. So every step you take is away from the safety of land into the middle of an ocean. So off we go. Very hard physical work to the North Pole. We get 642 miles from land. And the only thing we hadn't planned for is that the ocean starts to move beneath our feet. 600 miles from land. No radios, no backup, no helicopters, no one knows where we are. And the ice starts to move. And over 5 days, the entire ocean melts beneath our feet. Now, this is 30 years ago. So words like climate change, global warming, sustainability, all those words didn't exist. So we weren't standing there going, oh, great, it's climate change. We were thinking, we're going to die. Because the whole ocean has broken up beneath our feet. And it's quite a vulnerable feeling to be 600 miles from land in the middle of an ocean, and it decides to turn into an ocean, and you don't have a boat. And in 20 hours of trying to go north through this, we're still going south. So we're basically dead. But somehow we pull it together. Sorry to show you this picture, but we have to march 40-hour days to stay alive. Because it's always daylight. You can have as many hours in a day as you want. And Darrell, our brave American, became the first American to the North Pole on foot. Well, he lost a bit of his foot on the way, but, you know, he kept going. And after 56 days, we got there. 90 north, job done. And it was just the most extraordinary moment for me, because I thought, great, I'll never have to do this ever again, ever. That's it. Job done. And we flew a flag which I still think's reasonably important on the planet, although they can be on occasions rather annoying. But we were proud to fly that flag. We'd done it. Went back home. Behind all of these things was an extraordinary gentleman by the name of Jacques Cousteau. I'm sure some of you might remember his name. And Jacques Cousteau was my patron. He helped me. He gave me credibility. And for any more senior people here, you know what the greatest gift any of us can give to anybody? It's credibility. And it doesn't cost money. And Jacques Cousteau gave me credibility to make these journeys. But because it was Jacques, he said, Robert, at the end of your expedition, you must take away all your rubbish, equipment and garbage, leave Antarctica tidy. I said, job done, get on the phone and help raise some money. So that was our promise, that we would leave Antarctica tidy. We did. And now he said to me, what are you doing for the next 50 years? He didn't say well done for all we'd done, by the way. He just said, Rob, 50-year mission, this is 30 years ago, will you go out and make sure that we have the sense to leave Antarctica alone as a natural reserve land for science and peace? It is our last chance. No one owns Antarctica. Right now it is a natural reserve land for science and peace, and so it should remain. And we've been working on that for 30 reasonably tough years. And again, no one would listen. Imagine starting a 50-year mission. You say, well, I'd like to save Antarctica, and people go like, whatever. What's the point? That's an awfully long way away. We'll get to that some other time. It was quite hard to begin with, but how did we do it? Well, we started with practical missions. And I took down a whole group of young people to Antarctica, and we found all this garbage and rubbish left in Antarctica. It took us 8 years to remove this, a joint cooperation with the Russian government, don't try one, and a huge battle. I thought it might take 2 years, but you can only work 3 months a year there because of the weather. Huge battle, but we stuck with it. Students, young people, businesswomen, businessmen, engineers, all coming down to get this rubbish from this Soviet, well, ex-Soviet station, took down a giant ship. And please get one thing straight about the person that's standing here. We have a tiny team. The biggest our team ever gets is 5. Normally it's about 3. And we pull all this together. I raise the money, and everybody else makes sure it happens. And it's a huge battle, massive battle. You know, I've raised $60 million in my life, and I've got $5,000 in my bank account. This is full-on commitment, trust me, because people will take you seriously if you're all in. It's true. To get anything done, if you're all in, people will take you seriously. Took down this ship, loaded it up by hand, no infrastructure. That took 4 months to do. And by the way, my mum sends everybody love. My mum was 106 3 days ago, 106, going strong. And she said to me, Rob, you can't possibly go to the Antarctic and leave all that rubbish there, boy. You must recycle it. And I said, Mum, we're on it. So we recycled all of this back in the country of Uruguay, South America. One thing. It's not a lot for you to remember. Remember one thing from this little talk. Be relevant. Because it's really easy in our world to think you're being relevant. And you wake up one day and you find you're no longer relevant. So my suggestion is to have a relevancy check about once a year, just to see if you are still being relevant. And I realized on this day that if I was a rubbish collector, a garbage collector, I wouldn't possibly have a chance of helping save Antarctica. I had to think money. Why would people go to Antarctica to exploit it? It would be for energy, for fossil fuels. So I thought, being a bit slow, I thought, well, if we use more renewable energy in the real world, guess what will happen? No one's going to go there because it won't make financial sense to go there. So if you stack up young people, the moral issue of trying to preserve one place on the planet, and you make it not financially worth going, maybe we've got a chance. So I worked hard for the last 15 years on trying to be a renewable energy champion. By some miracle, we managed to get a beautiful yacht sponsored from the country of the Netherlands, possibly because I said to them, if we don't do something about climate change, you swim first. Well, we managed to get 2041, and she sailed the 7 seas, all about clean, renewable energy. Not telling people, but trying to show them. So we've sailed the 7 seas on our yacht, been, I think, 226,000 nautical miles so far, just showing people, even got a solar panel sail that works, and the sail's made of recycled plastic bottles. Show people, don't tell them. Testing out different types of fuels in our engine, and possibly my favorite country on the planet is India. I love the place. And if you took a yacht to India, it would not be relevant at all. People would go like, what? So sometimes in life, in order to be relevant, it hurts. So I spent about 4 years going around India on a bicycle, which was extremely dangerous, much more dangerous than walking to the poles. But it was great. And why did I go on a bicycle? Because it was relevant to the young people there. Had I arrived in a sort of limousine and a sort of Englishman in a white suit, it wouldn't have been very relevant, possibly even annoying to them. But, a red-faced, fat Englishman arriving on his bike, certainly they would remember that. So be relevant. And it was quite painful. Went up high into the Himalayas, couldn't do the last bit on the bike, but up to the source of the Ganges River. This is a very special place called Gomukh. It's a very spiritual place. But that glacier feeds the Ganges River that only gives 450 million people water. And that glacier is going back almost at crawling speed. So it was quite inspiring to go up there and see the reality. And I don't know if Paris, are you here? No. Anyhow, one of our alumni who's been on our ship to Antarctica, Paris Lumber, he said, right, we're going to build an education station running on renewable energy high up in the Himalayas. And with his fantastic organization called Global Himalayan Expeditions, they go up high into the Himalayas and take solar light to places that never had electricity. For example, this monastery, this gentleman could see for the first time in 2,000 years what he was doing. Fantastic stuff. This young man able to do homework after 6 o'clock at night because he's got a solar light. All of these things together matter. And that's my message to you all today is that, yeah, we've got a big mission on here, but lots of small things combined can make a massive difference. And one should never back off doing those small things. And every year we go to Antarctica. And we take young people from all over the world, old people like me from all over the world, businesswomen, businessmen, and we head south on our ship. And I'm very proud of this. We've had over, I think, 84 women who've come from the Middle East, often coming from countries that haven't even sent a man yet to Antarctica. So they go back with a really, really great story about being inspirational across the board, especially on renewable energy. And of course, a lot of people come from India. 1.4 billion people. We need to work with India. Can't expect India, as Raj will tell you here on the second row, you can't say to India, don't have all the things we've got. They have the right to have all the things we've got, but they need to get it in the better way than we still get what we've got. So one of the reasons that we work with people like Raj is to try and get that message across. A lot of work in China. Bluntly, India and China will be huge on the decisions of preserving Antarctica in 20 years. And also they'd be reasonably important about our survival on the planet. So a lot of people come from India, China. I think we've had 80 nations, 82 nations so far. And we go down there. You don't have to be a mountaineer or some environmental activist, just with passion and with heart, joining together with a great team, seeing this extraordinary place, the Antarctica. And 2 years ago, we were there, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack, actually, because I suddenly got blisteringly hot. And I thought, okay, not a bad place to die. It's been a good life, you know, sweating and thinking. And suddenly I realized that this was the temperature in Antarctica. Sort of thing that you don't go away and not remember. And huge amounts of ice. I go there every year, and I see more and more change in Antarctica every year. And I included this. Raj, I hope you like that. It's a new picture. Obviously, it's not a photograph. It's a, whatever it is, a sort of fancy thing you do on a computer. But that really is to scale of ice. No wonder the Titanic came off second, right? You know, that's what you see on the surface, but below, you know, you only see an eighth of an iceberg. And that's a lot of ice that piles off Antarctica. And, you know, all these coloured areas, just to give you an idea of scale, that bottom coloured area is the size of France, the top one's the size of Texas. This is huge amounts of ice shelf that comes off Antarctica. And actually, an ice shelf doesn't raise sea level. But an ice shelf, once it's gone, the ice from land can come in faster. It's a bit like pulling a cork. And more ice can come in. And once you have ice from land, that is raising sea level. So it may not matter hugely to some parts of the world, but we know this family in the Maldives. And they had to move house, but then it never did anything to deserve it. I don't need to tell you all about that, but you know, I think it's worth thinking about. So my son Barney, who sends his love, by the way, anybody from Australia here? I'm surprised you made it, because Australia went into sort of Fortress Australia mode. Barney went over there to see his mum, who gave up on me a long time ago because I was always on an iceberg, still best friends, but Barney went to go and see his mum, and I haven't seen him for 2 years, stuck in Fortress Australia, but I wish he was here, and I miss him actually a lot. But Barney and I made a decision. He said, Dad, listen, you go off, keep going on the preservation of Antarctica. But he said something I hope's relevant to all of you. He said, look, Dad, our generation's pretty upset with the state of the planet that you've left us. And we've got every right to be angry and cross. But he said, I want to try and help people really have convenient, easy solutions to effect. Because it's all very well being angry, but we've got to have solutions tacked on, fitted into that anger. So Barney has started his Climate Force Challenge, which you'll hear more of in a minute. But that's all about showing that solutions are possible and making it easy for people to put them together. There was only one catch. He said, Dad, will you walk to the South Pole with me? And I said, no, absolutely no. I've done all this stuff, forget it. And he said, well, Dad, if you do it, you will have crossed the whole of Antarctica. I said, yeah, it sounds interesting, but not good enough. He said, well, what about if we survive only on renewable energy? I said, okay, I'm interested. Yeah. Because remember, if we use more renewable energy, no one will go and take Antarctica to pieces. Now, I'm not telling you that I'm anything special. I'm certainly not. But sometimes to do things you can't just talk. And sometimes you have to sacrifice things to make change. If you do the same in life, you get the same. It's true. If we do the same to our planet, we get the same for our poor old planet. So just imagine this. Without water in Antarctica, if you can't drink water, you're dead of dehydration in 5 days. But it's minus 40. So it's all ice. So the best fuel to melt ice at minus 40 is Jet 1A fuel. It's fantastic. It's used in aeroplanes, so, you know, planes stay up in the sky because it doesn't freeze. If it froze, the planes would come down much quicker than anticipated. So, imagine that stuff's heaven. It's the best possible fuel on the planet. So Barney and I said, okay, what happens if we throw it away, if we don't use it? How can we survive? So we went to NASA and said to NASA, one day you people will go to Mars and you're going to have to melt ice on Mars. How about starting to help us work out how you can melt ice and snow from solar at minus 40? Put together a system with NASA, unbelievable. Bolt down, fill it up with ice and snow, off you go, 6 hours, you got hot water. No one had ever done this before. But imagine how it felt for us that we didn't have the Jet 1A fuel, which is heaven. Imagine it heats the tent at the same time that you're melting the ice. And then all you've got now is a sort of solar panel outside and some sort of frozen people inside thinking, why did we do this? But sometimes you've got to go that extra step. And this was a hell of a journey to make with my son. You know, let's get it straight. I am quite honestly completely impossible person, right? Really not an easy person. And Barney's everything I should be. He's handsome. He really is an environmentalist. You know, if I even sort of think about looking at a plastic bottle, he kicks me. He loves being outside. I can think of better things than being cold. He's a really cool guy, but we're very different. He's spiritual. I'm not really. So, you know, we can go like this as father and son and 2 generations. He's 27 and I'm 65. So possibly it might not have worked generationally, but we thought, no, it's got to work. And what we learned to do as father and son is to listen to each other, however annoying it might be. And I think that's an important thing we need to take away from this COP26, is however annoying it is, we have to listen to what other people are saying and not always get annoyed. So Barney and I set off. This was fantastic. I actually thought I was going to enjoy it even. Not really. And after 300 miles out of this 600 miles, my hip, my real hip, disintegrates, and I'm left lying in the snow in huge pain, and I fail. And I failed in everything in my life, and I mean everything, but I'd never failed to get to the pole when I said I was going to get there. So 300 out of 600 miles, I'm finished, and I have to go back to base. Pretty grim to leave your 23-year-old son to carry on with 2 companions into the hell of the South Pole. But Barney said, I've got this, Dad. And off they went. I felt such a failure. Felt I'd let down everybody. And they carried on, and Barney lost a bit of his toe, but he was willing to suck it up. And I flew into the pole to meet Barney, and it was great. You know, had some PR guru organize this, it would have been exactly to script. You know, old warrior falls to bits, handsome son makes it to pole on renewable energy. Fantastic. And it was his moment. It had nothing to do with me. It was Barney's moment. And Barney's gone on in Australia. Remember I told you he got stuck there, and he thought, well, while I'm stuck here, I ought to do something spectacular, which he's doing. This is the oldest rainforest on the planet in northern Queensland. There were trees growing here when there were trees growing in Antarctica. Think of that. And this area that Barney grew up next to was hacked down to grow bananas 50 years ago, and no one needed permission then. Think about that. And Barney said, damn it. So he's in the process of trying to buy this and replant it with trees that will grow to 2,000 years old. He wants to make a business out of it, so he can say to big corporations in Australia, hey, you know, you put 50,000 tons of crap into the atmosphere, why don't you plant 50,000 trees with me? He's employing local First Nation Australians. He's going for it. But remember, we don't have anything. So we're putting every single thing we've got into this. Barney's, you know, driving a taxi at weekends to keep the money coming in. We're not people that just sort of sign a check. This is tooth and nail battle, but I think it's fantastic to show people at Barney's generation that you can do it. So he's on it. However, as anybody, Raj, Mary knows me, that, you know, I wasn't going to leave those 300 miles to sort of talk about. So I had a new hip put back in and went back at the end of 2019 to complete those 300 miles to the South Geographic Pole. And at 89 degrees south, I'd be meeting Mary, Barney, and some other amazing people to do those last miles to the pole. I thought, got to have got this time. Got a fantastic new team, the top polar explorers in the world, Johanna and Katinka from Norway and Sweden. Managed to persuade them. It took quite a lot of work, but they would come and lead me to the South Pole, along with Kyle, our incredible cameraman from Norway, and off we went. This time, wait for it, we were testing out fuel, hard to imagine, testing out fuel, jet fuel, made from CO2 that we put into our atmosphere. Company in Switzerland sucks it out and made us jet fuel. Now, it's not at the petrol pumps yet, but think of that technology, that we could be powering things from the dirt we put into the air. So we were testing that, and off we went. This was fantastic. I actually enjoyed it. Never enjoyed one bloody day of doing this before, but under the leadership of Katinka and Johanna, I kind of learned how to do this properly. Absolutely great. 97 miles. Now, I've been trying to cross Antarctica for 34 years. 97 miles from the pole. I start thinking about pizza. I start thinking about having a bath, being an Englishman, of course. Walk out of the tent, fall over without thinking, and my new hip that had done so well blows out of its socket out to there, and I'm left lying in the snow crying and feeling a complete failure. Barney again came to the rescue, helped Mary and the rest of the team get to the pole. They didn't even notice that I wasn't there, but that was good. And I was left lying there again, 97 miles after over 2,000 miles of trying to do this thing. Flew to the pole on the shortest flight. Two very strong doctors put the hip back in, and I said, well, can't I go back and finish the journey? And they said, get out of the Antarctic, Rob, and got back home. COVID hit a week later, and I felt feeling pretty sorry for myself at this stage. Barney's gone to Australia and got stuck there, but I thought, damn it, get some more nuts and bolts in the hip, and at the end of next year, we're going back to finish that 97 bloody miles to the South Pole. Why? Why? Because we said we were going to do it. That's why. And although for a lot of people it may sound a bit stupid, but I'm sure all of you would agree that we need to hang on to this stuff. We can't back down, we can't falter, we can't fail, we have to push it forward, and I hope you don't mind the name, I quite like it, Undaunted. Actually, Mary decided on that name, thank you very much, Mary. And, you know, we've got 20 years to go until 2041, only 20 years. And we can do it, we can save the last great wilderness left on Earth. Honestly, anybody watching, it's not every day you get the chance to save a continent. We can do it. And we're on it in our own small way. And we're going back to Antarctica in early 2022 on a ship. Please come if you'd like to come. We need great people down on that ship. And we go for 2 weeks away from home. And it's all game on for March. And then at the end of the year, next year, we'll go back and finish those miles to the pole. And Barney's actually already told me, he said, Dan, most people hang their skis on the wall. Barney's going to get these very large bolts, and he's going to bolt the damn skis to the wall, and that's me done. And I think I'll go off somewhere warmer for a change. So I want to thank you all very much. I'm working with these guys. I don't know if anybody has seen the Carbonauts program. It's worth having a look at. I firmly believe in these words, that it's not somebody else's problem, it's ours. And I want to thank you all so much. And that's the last thing. I'm useless, pathetic even, on this whole Instagram thing, but I've been told by my son and by the team that I've got to make an effort. So if you do anything after the talk, do whatever one's supposed to do with this. Please, like it, hate it, or whatever one does with these things, because I think actually if we can build up a good thing following whatever it is, you know, it might help save Antarctica. So thank you all so much for listening to our story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert, for telling us your journey and giving a little bit of insight on the importance of saving the planet and saving the poles. We're now going to pass on to quick Q&A moderated by me with Robert, and then we will open the floor for questions to the audience, both digitally and here on the ferry.
Well done. Everybody happy? Good.
I'm not going to take notes. I'm just making sure I got the questions. Is this on? Yes, perfect. Well, as I said, Robert, thank you so much for being here with us and for telling us your whole journey, accompanied by your team and your initiative on 2041. I think you've spoken a lot about how, especially when you recently went to the pole and the temperatures increased, you realized on the decrease of the poles in the last years. So I think since the 50s, Antarctica has lost 28,000 kilometers square of ice shelf. What can be done by world powers to further protect and preserve the Antarctic Peninsula ice shelves?
Well, I think it's, you know, I by the way, you should know this, everybody, that I was invited to all those blue zones, green zones, or whatever they are all over somewhere. And I said, no. What's the point? I can't add much to that. I'd rather be here. And honestly, I'm you know, I've come all the way from America via seeing my mum, which was pretty important too, because I believe it's us. You know, whatever the powers do on Earth, the powers do on Earth. But I think it's what we can do to help preserve Antarctica. And you know, it's fairly simple. You know, I brought this along here. This light. You know, is a solar light, and you know, it bloody works. And if people use more renewable energy, then Antarctica can be saved. So I think it's a question of energy use, using more renewable energy to save Antarctica. And at some stage, all these world leader people, hopefully they might get younger and a bit more sort of dynamic as world leaders than they are right now, but that's another story. At some stage, we, all of us, have got to make sure that it's on their agenda, that they know that millions, billions of people actually are saying we should leave Antarctica alone. And that's my job over the next 20 years. So it's on people's radar. It's an issue that is there, and it's not a political one. It's just, should we leave it? Should we destroy it? Let's leave it. So I think what we can do now matters more to the preservation of Antarctica. Now, when Raj and Mary and our teams go to Antarctica, I'm not talking about saving Antarctica then, Carmen. I'm not talking about it because we can't do it then. what I'm saying is get them, whoever comes with us, get them to be a really strong, fantastic leader. And in 20 years from now, I'll be on the phone saying, basically, this is the plan, will you help? So it's laying seeds now for the preservation of Antarctica. But renewable energy, I think, is the deal of what people can do.
Thank you.
And be aware of it. Yeah.
You've also touched on biodiversity loss, and I think especially on the Arctic, but there's also biodiversity loss on wildlife and the marine ecosystems. What would you say are the direct consequences of the melting ice caps on this biodiversity and wildlife? Well,
I'm one of the biggest dangers walking to the North Pole is the polar bear attack. And, you don't mess with polar bears, that's for bloody sure. I once was attacked in a tent by a polar bear, and honestly, I've never been the same since. Polar bear just ripped the whole tent, and we were sort of lying there going, what? Just completely off. So they're pretty serious beasts. And I think, as an example, you could always frighten off polar bears by noise when they weren't desperately hungry. And they'd hear a lot of noise, and you'd shout and scream, because I don't want to shoot a polar bear. But you have a rifle, because I'm not that environmentally to say, kill me. And now, people who go up there are being attacked just on sight, because the polar bears are so hungry. There's an absolutely key example of what's happening to them. And, we've taken away their home. Imagine how we'd feel if we went home this evening and it disappeared. So I think, and polar bears have been always a sort of case study of the Arctic. But I don't know if any of you know that now polar bears are coming south and they're mating with the grizzly bears. And so you've got these sort of camel, whatever the word is, sort of half polar and half grizzly colour. And eventually, I suppose it'll go back to, a different colour entirely. So I think the polar bear is a very strong example of what we're doing to the wildlife, and I see that. But I'm much more of a practical person. I can't start talking about lichen and mosses and all those things. All I do know is that friends of mine up in the Arctic, in their homes, the whole house has gone like this, and they've got nowhere else to go. So you go in to see them, and their table is propped up by bricks under one side, and the whole of their life is at this angle. Because of the permafrost melting, the house is collapsing. So one sees that clearly.
Thank you. And now taking a little bit to the 2041 Foundation, could you please tell us a little bit more about the initiatives that have been taken by the Foundation to promote leadership development and sustainability education?
Well, I'm a great believer that if we all become better leaders, we can do a better job of what we're all doing here. So what we do is we go to Antarctica, and Raj and many people here have been with us, and the emphasis is to come back as hopefully a better leader, a good public speaker maybe, come back with a great story to tell, to engage other people. And I think that what our foundation tries to do is to include people who normally you wouldn't imagine to go to Antarctica. So we take people from the middle of Africa or the middle of India, where people have never seen snow sometimes from who come with us. So the foundation is about leadership, so people become better leaders, so eventually they can help preserve Antarctica, because as better leaders, they'll have more influence to help save Antarctica. And we try and involve people on the expeditions who you wouldn't normally imagine that would come from countries that would normally not participate in this type of thing. And again, that's important, because every nation on Earth has the right to say, leave Antarctica alone. Don't have to be a rich nation to say that.
I like that. It also provides that inclusivity of everyone being part and unified in the same conversation to save the Arctic. And I think to create young leaders, as you were saying, it's very important. Education is very important. So, as a special envoy to the Director General of UNESCO, how can local organizations and young people urge their local governments to include in their curricular environmental education in school?
Tricky. I think it's sort of happening to a certain extent that. I mean, obviously in wealthier nations, I know that Raj does a lot of work with that in parts of India where he comes from, trying to get it onto the curriculum. And I think that from our point of view, I'm very focused, probably because I'm not very clever, but I'm very focused on saying, how can we get Antarctica onto a curriculum? And as you well know, if you start talking about penguins to primary school children, they're all over it. So we try and get stuff going on curriculums for young people on Antarctica, on penguins especially to begin with, and the fact that penguins are being affected by climate change. That's something that sort of resonates with the young people, thinking, why are they getting affected? So I think that, and that's not a bad thing to Jacques Cousteau said something to me, which I'll always remember. Jacques Cousteau was known, what, for the oceans, right? He was the ocean man. And he said, Rob, you know, in the end, stick to your area. Because if suddenly you try and do everything, no one's going to listen to you, because they go like, what? I thought Rob Swan was talking about icebergs, and now he's talking about this or that. I've learned to try and stick pretty much to the Arctic and the Antarctic and inspire people on those areas. And when it comes to the rest of the world, other people who come with us, you know, whether it be Raj, Mary, all the teams that come, and our guy I was mentioning earlier, Paris from India, they go off and do different things. But I think the key to it is that you give people a story, because isn't that the most powerful thing? It always has been the most powerful thing, is the ability to tell a story. And if you can tell the story well, whether it's around a campfire or like we're sitting here, that has impact.
You were also mentioning before, when you got back from your first expedition and you were talking to the world about your expedition, you asked yourself, what can I do for people to listen? So we know the polar regions play a vital role in regulating the climate and the world temperatures. What can global communities do to mobilize their governments and make sure they're listened to prevent and to conserve the frozen poles?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to it's all the same deal, really, Carmen. It's all the same. It's all to do with energy. And I think that, you know, that's why we're all here, is that I went on the news or something earlier, Sky News or something, 5 minutes, 3 times, ladies and gentlemen, 3 times, they tried to get me to say that COP was a failure. 3 times. You were sitting there. You heard it. 3 times they were saying, well, Rob, do you think this has been a failure? And I said, no. And then 3 minutes later, they said, well, surely it's... And I said, no. And I think that it's just so important that, you know, we come out of all of this with a real sense of building on whatever is decided on. And that I think when you think about classrooms, you think about curriculums, you think about everybody who's listening, we just need to step it up. And, you know, for good or bad, that's all I've ever tried to do. And it hasn't been successful particularly, but by God, we've tried hard. You've heard the story. And I think that's the message, that we've just got to step it up. We can't just be angry and frustrated by all of these things. We've got to say, okay, fine, it's not looking as good as we hoped it was, but we've got to build on the things that have come out of it and be resilient, not give up. Possibly even sacrifice a few things. You know, maybe some of us want our cake and eat it. You know, maybe, you know, everybody wants a brand new iPhone 20 or something. I don't know. But, you know, what are we willing to give up? What are we willing to sacrifice in some small way? And I think that's a message that should come out of this, that it really is down to us. And we all have, you know, we live in a democracy of buying stuff. And, you know, we maybe can show more power by buying stuff. In the last election, even in America, where I live, I don't know, 30 or 40% of young people who could vote didn't vote. And, you know, all of those things we can tighten up. And I think those are the lessons that we could take from here. And as I said on the news when they were saying it's a failure, I said, well, no. You know, I went to COP15. How many people knew that COP15 even took place? No one. But sure as hell, everybody knows about COP26, so it's not a bad step in the right direction. May not be quite what we hope for, but it's certainly raised the game a bit.
Thank you, Robert. I think you raised a really good point, which is not just speaking out and speaking up, which is important, but also taking action with practical solutions.
And that's why we're here. Come on, go outside the door, away from COP. What do people see of it? A few bumbling old people driveling on about something at one side of it, and then everybody going completely ballistic on the other side, you know, almost in a sort of riot state. That's all they see. They don't see this. And this is a, you know, One Young World is a group of people coming together to have these discussions. And no one's screaming at each other. We might still feel a bit frustrated, but this is what it's about. And that's why I'm so proud to be part of this, because all that I've seen and heard of what's happening here is about solutions. And all of us can do more with solutions. You know, there's no question.
Well, we're happy to have you here. And I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to open the floor for questions. Teresa, why don't we start with the digital audience? Yep, microphone.
Thank you very much. We have some. Hello. We have some great questions in from the digital audience. The first one is Esther from Haiti. How have your numerous explorations changed your relationship with nature and the environment?
I'll tell you exactly. Thanks very much from Haiti there. I know how incredibly powerful our planet is. I've seen the harsh side of this world, and it does not give a hell about us. It doesn't. I live in a forest fire area, and you see fire coming towards you. There's nothing you can do about it. So I've seen that nature can just say to all of us, forget it, out. So I've seen how powerful it is, and I've also seen how it can restore itself so well. And look what's happened during COVID and all these things. People could breathe air in Delhi for the first time for a while, Raj, you know. So I restoring itself, and it's don't mess with it. And I think COVID is a typical example of us messing with it. And look at us, the state we're in now. Good question.
Thank you. Should we go with another digital audience question?
Absolutely. We'll globetrot over to Italy this time. And Kira has asked, what direct consequences of climate change have you witnessed over the years in the polar regions?
Well, I can promise you that imagine sleeping the night in a tent, and beneath you've got ice, and then beneath that ice is 5 miles of freezing cold ocean, and you're 600 miles away from land, and then it all starts to break up. And it never had before. So I've seen it that close. You know, if you're thinking about ice at 0 degrees, Italian, yeah, 0 degrees Celsius, it stays ice, plus half it melts. So I've seen huge changes, and annoying changes too. When you're walking to the South Pole, I've noticed a difference in the surfaces in 30 years since I've started this, because sometimes you get warmer spells and you get these little layers of ice that I never had that before, and suddenly your skis, any skiers here will know, go into the blasted snow, and then the sledge falls in. And if you're doing that, you know, 150 times per mile. It's really annoying and it takes more effort. So I've seen changes in surface, I've seen ice caps melting beneath my feet, and I've seen huge areas of ice breaking off Antarctica that, you know, shouldn't have broken off in quite such a quick way. So yeah, I've seen some changes from Italy there.
Why don't we come to the audience here on the ferry? You can raise your hand if you have any questions for Robert. Yes, one right there.
Haven't the Russians been trying to claim some of these previously unclaimed areas, and is there any recourse?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. You know, the Russians do come up with spectacularly odd things that they do, where they take a ship out into the middle of the Arctic and drop flags with weights on down to a mountain range below, saying, we claim this range, which just happens to join up with Russia. I think that the Arctic's a really difficult situation because the northern trade routes and everything that are going to open up because we melted the ice, I can't stop that. But so the Arctic is sadly for me an example of what we mustn't do in the Antarctic. But I still have hope for the Arctic a bit, but it's looking pretty grim when people are dropping flags on mountain ranges. And you know, I was talking to my mother about it actually, and she said if somebody came from outer space and said, why are these people able to take their ships through these new routes because the ice melted, and what's the first thing they think about doing is to actually get more stuff out of the ground that caused the problem in the first place. So, you know, the Arctic's a tricky one for me. And I don't want to switch off from it, but it seems like it's game on, and I have hope that Canada might actually make more effort on all of that. And I feel that, you know, without being rude, the two biggest problems for Antarctica is Russia and China, because they're not really good at rules. And China is increasing its presence in Antarctica, but if per barrel of oil, per ton of gas, it doesn't make financial sense, and as Mary, Raj, anybody's been to Antarctica here, it's a really long way away, and it would cost a stack load of money to go and exploit it. Very expensive. So if it's very expensive and it doesn't make financial sense to go there, well, maybe even Russia and China might not do it. And that's the big battle for me. And it's the battle for us. So, you know, watch that space. In 20 years' time, we've got to raise the game again. But great question. It's tricky. Really is. Yes, sir, you had a question.
Hi, Max Skarkas from Edinburgh. I thought that was an incredibly inspirational talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I mean, I never realized that you'd done this expedition with just clean energy. Absolutely fantastic. And I think the thing I would take is, you know, obviously individuals can make a difference, and we can all make a difference. Maybe one thing, I came in a little bit late, so you maybe said this at the start, but how can we all help with what you're doing?
Well, I think that it's very generous of you. Thank you. I think that first is to put Antarctica on the radar. A lot of people possibly didn't know that 2041's the year that we have to decide. How many people didn't know that in this room? Right, okay, and you're all very knowledgeable people. That's how. Get it on the bloody radar, excuse the language, and get people to at least realize that it's happening. We have a little foundation in the United States of America where that foundation helps people from countries that couldn't possibly come on the expedition. And that foundation, 2041 Foundation, supports a limited amount of people to come who couldn't afford to come normally, and they become champions in their nations. One of the things because remember how simple I am? I'm thinking if I can get, 180 nations, 200 nations on the planet that would never go and exploit Antarctica behind preserving it, there could be a bit of Khrushchev work in the United Nations with people saying, get your hands off, we all own it, get countries behind it. And I got Slovenia behind that the other day. They'll never go on a ship to Antarctica to exploit it, but they've joined the treaty and they've said, we're joining it to preserve it. So that's what you can do. Get it on the radar and help support the foundation in a small way to take people, young people from countries that would never normally go. Thank you for that question. Or come yourself, please.
Well, thank you for the audience for the questions. We're running out of time, but we're going to leave it on that note on how we can help 2041 Foundation. Please give a huge round of applause for Robert Swan for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I just want to end up with one thing, because I promised my mum I'd do this, so bear with me. That she always says, that in a dark room, there's some Chinese saying that I'll get all wrong, but, one candle in a dark room can do the job. So, with this light, let's be that little light in the darkness and just make sure it's a solar bloody light while we're on it, okay? So thank you very much.
Hello? Yeah. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you for the digital audience to tuning in and for all the questions. Please stick around for the next section, which will start at 5 p.m.